So it feels like we're finally at a turning point when it comes to some of these Verdansk leaks and some of the changes that are happening going into Verdansk. It seems like whoever was in charge, whether it was Raven, Infinity Ward, Treyarch, Sledgehammer, or somebody who's in charge of all that with Activision or Xbox, regardless, it seems like they're starting to yield on a lot of the community concerns that we've had for the past few years. And things are kind of reverting back to as we wanted a lot of the things we had in Warzone 1. I don't think anyone really asked for Warzone 2 when it came out. We just wanted maybe a new map, maybe a new meta. And we didn't really want the overhaul that they gave us with backpacks and all these other things. And for the past couple of years, it seems like they've been reverting a lot of those changes to get back to Warzone 1, which was peak Call of Duty for Warzone Battle Royale. Raven just tweeted today, it says, "You may notice something a little different starting today. In preparation for future updates, we will begin intermittently testing 150 players across standard Battle Royale playlists." So if you go and play the Battle Royale, I'm not really a big map enjoyer. I will be playing Verdansk when it comes back, but I prefer Rebirth or Area 99, like if I don't really feel like Rebirth that day. But regardless, 150 players is being tested. So if you get in a random lobby where it's 150 players, that is the lobby. And I think there's probably some tweaks they need to do on respawns or gulags or go again gulag or whatever the heck to keep the lobby still healthy with 150 players. But this is one they've pushed back on. Even when they initially made the change to 120 or whatever the case is, it sounded like this was an issue that was done purely driven by data and people kind of thinking about it, not having to do anything with the servers. I know a lot of people say, well, the servers can't really hang or handle that. We could have 50 player lobbies. Servers aren't going to be anything spectacular. They still need to work on that, but this was a huge step in that direction. And then there's a few other leaks that came out today. Ghost of Hope or Charlie Intel, a combination of retweeting those things. So we'll go through some of those. A side note on the Raven thing, it won't impact ranked. So ranked will still just maintain the same. Obviously, they can't really just change it mid-season, but the base playlist for Battle Royale will have the opportunity to have 150 players, which I've already seen a little bit of. Hope tweeted this little image. It says, "It's back." And this is a reference to floating loot, not stopping power or the MP7, sadly. But floating loot is back. How it'll look or how it'll work, it does definitely increase the flow of the game. A lot of times you just run through loot. There were always instances where floating loot could lead to issues where you're trying to ping, which we still have those issues now with loot on the ground. So I'm sure they'll have to figure it out. They'll have to dial it in. But floating loot is just superior in my opinion. You spend less time looking at the ground and developing bad habits of staring at the ground and having bad centering. So that's a huge W there. Next one up, it says there is currently plans for Red Doors to return on Verdansk in a future Warzone season. And this is kind of gives us a little bit of an idea of how the pacing and tempoing will go. Obviously, if you watched the previous video about some of those leaks with train station being closed, maybe there's a point where train station will open and that'll be part of seasonal content. Maybe stadium that sounds like it's leaked to be closed will have an update where it's open like we had. They'll be able to progress through those phases that we had. Maybe the underground train station will work. Maybe any of those updates that came through. Maybe we'll have the bunkers with key cards, and maybe one of these other things will happen that will like evolve the map much more quickly, so it doesn't feel as stale, especially since it's a map that we did play for roughly 1.5 years, although it was 2 significantly different versions with some minor updates throughout that time span. But regardless, it gives us kind of an idea into that. It'll probably launch, and then shortly after they already kind of have an idea of what the content they want to do, and then they'll go ahead and bring those out as time goes on. So huge W in my opinion. It's getting kind of a list of all the things people wanted, starting to check a lot of those off, which is pretty nice. There's still a few points that we'll talk about that I think haven't been addressed, but need to be addressed. One other part is what's going to happen at the integration. It'd be kind of silly, a lot of people say this, be silly to have the map for probably like 8 months and then us get Avalon. It's looking like, based off the Ghost of Hope tweet, that potentially Avalon is going to be used for probably zombies and ground war potentially, and might not necessarily make it into the Warzone map. Maybe it will at some point later down the road. So a lot of people saying, well, that'd be silly to just give us Verdansk for 8 months. yeah, it would be silly. Maybe March will be the new map integration time, and maybe this is full, like, just guessing, March would be a better time to release a new map. So maybe we get Verdansk for a year, and hopefully by that time they figured out how to make the game file small enough so that we can actually have 2 big maps in rotation and not necessarily get rid of Verdansk completely. Similar to how we have the rotation with Rebirth Island and Area 99, and then that we had with Vondel and Ashika and all these other things. Obviously, those maps are much smaller, so they do have to figure out that file size thing. They have been doing those updates where I'm sure a lot of you guys logged on the other day for the update and it was like 105 gigs. That's them shrinking the file size. You may have to re-download 105 gigs, but previously the file was like 110, and then they shaved off 5 gigabytes, and they're shaving off 5 gigabytes each update. So it may look like a big update, but reality, they're just shaving off a little by little, so that ideally we'll get to an opportunity where the file size is small enough so that we can actually have both maps in tandem, because that's been the big issue with especially old gen consoles or even current gen consoles. 400 gigabytes if you do the game plus zombies plus like if you do everything, you end up using almost all your data you're going to have to delete. And I know a lot of people do relate to that. So they have to figure out that problem. And I'm sure they're trying to figure that out, because there is a portion that is vocal about Verdansk. They'll play it every day. And other people that think, oh, it's just nostalgia, they'll get bored with it in 2 months. They're going to have another option. So that'll be the happy medium. Now, let's get into some other hot topics that a lot of people will talk about, and some stuff that I think they still need to address. So one of the things right here is the anti-cheat. Back in a blog from January 17th, they mentioned that Season 3 and beyond, a multitude of new tech, including a brand new system to authenticate legit players and target cheaters. So this should be a huge update to the anti-cheat with Season 3. I wouldn't hold my breath on this though. They haven't done anything for us to build trust in that area. I just wanted to point this out. And this is actually specifically focusing on an element of it where the shadow ban system being wonky. If you're caught up in that, this should help with that. And it says, note, as we get closer to Season 3, we'll dive a little deeper on these systems. However, it's important we don't provide too many details that could give cheap developers a peek behind the curtain. We have about 3 weeks, I think it's 22 days until Season 3, which is when we will likely get Verdansk. They just dropped the Ninja Turtle event, and that's supposed to run for 2 weeks. That is around the time I think we're going to get roadmap, blog, hype trailer, come back to Warzone Verdansk, marketing. We're going to get a lot of that around that time. So it being not announced just quite yet and released and hyped by the studio isn't really weird. I think they were paid by Ninja Turtles, however, whoever owns the rights to that, to be able to get that done. The other part I'll point out is a lot of people will go to Steam charts. The game is in a very bad state in terms of player count. It's what it was towards the end of Warzone 2. We don't have any data before that. And this is solely based off Steam, which roughly averages around 50 to 100,000 players depending on the time of the day. And sometimes a little bit lower, sometimes a little bit higher on update. But generally that's the rough number. And based off the Xbox acquisition, they represent around 5%, or at least at that time. Now at Game Pass, that percentage might be smaller. So generally whatever the number is, a loose estimate, probably 3% to 7%, you're going to end up having an idea what the player count is. 50,000 or so would put it around 1 million concurrent. So even though the game isn't necessarily dead, it's definitely not as popular as it was, where it was averaging over 200,000. That would be an insane number. 4x that, that's 4 or 5 million concurrent. It's definitely not killing it, but we still got to get to the main part, which is, I already addressed some of them throughout this, but the anti-cheat definitely needs to deliver. The servers continue to need to improve. If you're in the US, you don't really have as big of an issue with servers, especially if you play normal times. But around the world, there should just be better server stability. There's still a lot of bugs in the game. They're definitely not as frequent as they were back in December. So they've improved in that area and they need to continue to improve, but there's still too many. I think the loadout system has really made a lot of issues where people have reached some theoretical cap. I think it's around 100 loadouts. And once you've done that by creating new loadouts for 8 attachment, 5 attachment, zombies, multiplayer, then you kind of reach your limit and then it starts acting really buggy. The same way that previous loadout systems were able to create 5 blueprints for a gun, and then it just wouldn't let you. I think this system is a little bit more complicated and unnecessarily complicated. So hopefully they get that stuff dialed in, because right now it's a mess. And that's a UI related thing, just with some of the decisions they've made. Even though they cleaned it up, they broke some things. And I think those need to be dialed in. There is a little bit of a meta shift that would probably need to happen. I know that there's a lot of people that want and need and will not play Verdansk without one-shot sniping being good. Even if they made it good, it still wouldn't be as broken as the Kar 98 and the HDR were back in the day. But to offset that, you do have to balance the long-range option. So that'd be better bullet velocity, better recoil. Even though I know the meta options don't have a ton, the reason we only use those 3 options is because everything else has a little bit too much recoil and not enough bullet velocity, a little bit too hard to use. So those will need to be dialed in as well, so that both are very strong. And I don't know if they'll adjust the TTK or health to make it real OG, but regardless, those need to be dialed in together to make them both feel good, both feel kind of like, damn, you can actually get beamed from 100 meters. You can get sniped from 100 meters. Yes, make it like that. And then there's the concern with the vehicles. There should be hopefully an update relating to vehicles. I've heard rumors around that. And then the lack of balloons. People don't really, it sounds like most people don't want balloons. People are fine with zips to get on top of buildings and stuff like that. At least on the high traffic buildings, that it's better than walking up 17 flights of stairs. The thing that they've improved on quite a bit, which I don't really hear as many people talking about anymore, is the audio. I personally feel like the audio's in a much, much better state than it's been in a very long time. And I've stopped hearing a lot of complaints about it. Now that I've mentioned the video, people be saying, you're crazy, it sucks, whatever. But regardless, I think in general, it has been significantly better. And the movement, there's a little bit, people are torn between that. I think the main thing that people align with is a little bit more snappiness. This would help the drop shot, and then maybe offer some dive options so that people can still dive forward, but they don't really want to take advantage of side diving because they don't know how to not move their left stick to drop shot. I don't know. There's some stuff that they got to work with that. I don't think the movement is like a deal breaker for most people. They either like it or they don't, but it's not going to be like, oh, I can't play because of that with all the other stuff. And then the API, this would be another cool one. So you can just see player data. If you want to check somebody's stats in game to see maybe they're cheating, maybe we can get other API tools to see what the weapon usages are for perks and other stuff. And it's gotten to the point where we've covered a lot of the stuff and we're looking like it's a decent spot. But it still needs a little bit more cooking. 3 weeks left. We'll see where it goes. See you on the next one. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.